1 black espresso. Now. The voice cut sharply through the quiet hum of the cafe, slicing the air like a blade. Evelyn looked up from her station just as the door burst open, rain dripping from the shoulders of a man whose presence seemed to suck the warmth from the room. William Carter, billionaire CEO, feared and infamous, glared down at her, impatience burning in his eyes. She slid the steaming cup across the counter, steady and unshaken. "Here's your espresso, sir," she said softly. "But it's not the coffee that's bitter." The room fell silent. Everyone waited for the explosion. Instead, something unexpected happened. Evelyn Rivera moved quietly through the soft hum of the early morning cafe, her footsteps muffled on the worn wooden floor. The scent of fresh coffee mingled with the faint aroma of baked bread, but beneath it all hung a quiet melancholy, one she carried like a second skin. The faded apron she wore bore stains from years of honest work, and her hands were steady, practiced, yet touched by fatigue. To the regulars, Evelyn was almost invisible, a constant, like the clock ticking above the counter or the chime of the doorbell as customers came and went. No one asked about her life. No one noticed the way her eyes lingered on the rain-slicked streets outside, or the way her jaw tightened when she paused at the cracked photograph taped inside the cafe's bulletin board. They didn't see the woman who had once held the kind of knowledge and power that could have moved mountains, only to leave it behind like a shattered dream. That morning, as the grey sky spilled steady rain against the windows, the door slammed open with the force of a storm within. William Carter entered, the billionaire CEO whose name was whispered across boardrooms and business lunches with a mix of awe and fear. His tailored coat was soaked through, droplets falling in rhythmic taps on the floor, but it was his furious glare that cut deepest into the room's quiet. He stormed to the counter, where Evelyn was wiping a spill with practiced calm. The few patrons shrank back, their conversations dying mid-sentence as William's gaze swept the room like a tempest. "This coffee," he barked, "is cold." Evelyn met his eyes with steady calm, unfazed by the volcanic temper that had reduced others to silence. She didn't rush to appease or retreat. Instead, she slid the mug back across the counter with deliberate care and said softly, "You're not angry about the coffee. You're angry because no one dares to tell you when you're wrong." The cafe held its breath. William froze, his eyes narrowing as if seeing her for the first time. The room's tension thickened, but Evelyn did not blink. There was no malice in her voice, only a quiet truth that seemed to pierce the armor he wore like a second skin. For a long moment, the billionaire CEO said nothing. Then, without another word, he turned and left, the door's chime echoing behind him like a fading storm. Evelyn returned to her work, silent as ever, but something had shifted, not in the world, but in a single man who had long forgotten what it meant to be seen beyond power and pride. The next day, the cafe was noticeably quieter than usual. Word of William Carter's outburst had spread swiftly through the small community, like a sudden gust of wind disrupting the steady calm. The usual hum of conversations dimmed to cautious whispers, and the regular customers stole quick glances at Evelyn as she moved behind the counter with the same composed grace. But despite the undercurrent of gossip and the sideways stares, Evelyn did not flinch or change her routine. Her hands were steady, her motions practiced and deliberate, as she arranged the coffee cups, wiped down the counters, and set out fresh pastries. She was a calm presence amid the subtle storm. She arrived early, before the first rush, the pale morning light filtering softly through the cafe windows, casting a golden glow on the worn wooden tables. Evelyn found solace in this quiet, the familiar scent of roasted beans and warm milk grounding her. She took a moment to breathe deeply, steadying her nerves. The night's events had left a mark, but she refused to let them dictate her day. Then the door chimed, a sound that always brought a ripple of anticipation, and there he was again. William Carter stepped inside, his towering frame filling the doorway, but the fire that had blazed in his eyes yesterday was replaced by something quieter, something heavier, like exhaustion settling deep into his bones. His face was unreadable, guarded, almost weary. He walked toward the counter with deliberate steps, his usual commanding presence tempered by a rare vulnerability. "I'm offering you a deal," he said, voice low but steady. 30 days. You shadow me at my company. One honest piece of feedback every day. No filters. In return, I'll pay off your student loans. The cafe fell into an eerie silence. The words hung heavily in the air, thick with the weight of possibility and skepticism. The regulars paused mid-sip, watching the unusual exchange between the billionaire and the unassuming waitress. Evelyn looked at him steadily, her eyes sharp, studying the man who had seemed so untouchable just a day before. There was no pride in her acceptance, no triumph, just a quiet, resolute determination. "I agree," she said simply. The following days blurred into a tapestry of long hours and slow revelations. Evelyn followed William into the towering glass and steel skyscraper that housed Carter Enterprises, a world far removed from the cozy intimacy of the cafe. She moved like a shadow, silent, observing, absorbing the whirlwind of meetings, negotiations, and power plays that dictated the company's heartbeat. The boardroom was a battlefield where suits wielded numbers and legal jargon like weapons. Evelyn spoke little in those early days, but when she did, her words cut through the polished noise with a precision born of clarity and courage. Her insights, drawn from an engineer's logic and a heart shaped by hardship, unsettled some but intrigued others. She noticed the subtle signs others missed, the exhaustion etched into William's sharp jawline, the rare moments when his eyes softened behind the corporate mask. She saw the way his staff recoiled under his harsh gaze, the armor he wore to hide the loneliness that wealth could never erase. And she witnessed the small, fragile moments he tried to conceal, the way he lingered over a faded photograph on his desk, the trembling of his hands when a crucial deal collapsed, the rare smile that appeared when a child's drawing was pinned to his office wall. Each day, Evelyn's honest feedback chipped away at the fortress William had built around himself. Her words were unvarnished truths that forced him to confront parts of his life he had long buried beneath power and pride. In return, he began to open up, sharing fragments of his story, the love he lost, the family he failed, the mistakes that haunted his nights. Through it all, Evelyn's own past remained a silent shadow. Few knew she had once been a rising star in engineering, a brilliant mind with a promising future shattered by tragedy and heartbreak. She had walked away from a life that demanded everything, choosing instead to rebuild quietly in the margins, far from the glare of success. Her resilience was hidden beneath her calm exterior, a secret strength that made her the unlikely anchor in William's turbulent world. By the end of the 30 days, something fundamental had shifted, not just in the company's boardroom, but in William himself. He no longer looked at Evelyn as a mere waitress or a passing inconvenience. He saw her as a force of nature, a woman whose power lay not in loud declarations, but in the steady, unyielding truth she carried with her every day. Their deal had begun as a challenge, a test of wills and endurance. But it became something more, a fragile bridge between two people scarred by life, each learning to see the other's worth beyond the surface. It was a beginning neither had expected, a promise of change rooted in honesty and unexpected respect. And as Evelyn walked back to the cafe each evening, she carried with her the quiet satisfaction of having reclaimed her voice, and perhaps her future. The 30 days had passed in a blur, but the transformation in both Evelyn and William was undeniable. The final morning of Evelyn's shadowing experience dawned clear and cold, with the first sharp breaths of winter settling over the city. As she stepped into the towering glass building one last time, Evelyn felt a quiet mix of relief and something deeper, an unfamiliar flutter of hope. William was already waiting in his office, a rare softness in his eyes that had never been there before. The walls around him were lined with trophies, photographs, and mementos, but none held the weight of the moment between them now. He gestured for her to sit, his usual commanding tone replaced by something gentler, more human. "Evelyn," he began, voice steady but tinged with vulnerability, "these past 30 days, I thought this was about a business experiment, a lesson in humility. But you taught me something far more important. You showed me what it means to be seen, to be understood." Evelyn met his gaze, calm and unwavering. "You were never as untouchable as you pretended," she said quietly. "And sometimes that's the hardest thing to admit." A pause hung between them before William finally nodded. "You were right. About the coffee, about everything. No one ever told me when I was wrong. No one dared. I lost more than deals. I lost myself." The room seemed to hold its breath. Then William reached into a drawer and pulled out a small, worn photo. It was of a woman, radiant and smiling, the light in her eyes unmistakable. "She was everything to me. My world. I lost her. And I lost my way after." Evelyn's heart tightened, recognizing the pain behind his confession. She knew too well what it meant to lose love and purpose, how it could hollow a person out until all that remained was survival. As the day unfolded, they walked through the corridors of the company together, discussing plans, strategies, and mistakes with a new openness. Evelyn's feedback was no longer met with resistance, but with genuine reflection. The staff noticed the change too. William's rare smiles were becoming more frequent, his anger tempered by a humility they had never seen. Late that afternoon, as the sun dipped below the horizon and cast the city in amber light, William took Evelyn to the rooftop garden. The cold air bit at their cheeks, but the view was breathtaking, the skyline stretching endlessly, alive with possibility. "Before you came," William said, "I was a man defined by fear of failure, of loneliness, of being forgotten. You reminded me that even the strongest walls can be broken down. Not with force, but with truth." Evelyn nodded, feeling the weight of those words settle inside her. "And you reminded me that strength doesn't come from hiding. It comes from facing what scares you." For the first time since they met, William reached out and took her hand, a simple gesture, but one heavy with meaning. It spoke of respect, of gratitude, and perhaps something more fragile yet real. That evening, Evelyn returned to the café. The familiar buzz was back, but something had shifted in her demeanor, a quiet confidence that hadn't been there before. She served coffee with the same gentle grace, but now the whispers carried admiration, not pity. News of their unlikely partnership spread, sparking conversations about power, humility, and redemption. William publicly acknowledged Evelyn's role in changing his outlook, praising her insight in interviews and meetings, though he remained discreet about her past. There were reasons, painful, private reasons, why he couldn't expose everything in front of the world. Love, loss, and scars don't always wear their stories openly. Days turned into weeks, and Evelyn's student loans were quietly paid off, but more importantly, a new chapter was opening. William offered her a position in his company, not as a waitress or an outsider, but as a valued adviser. She accepted, not for prestige or money, but because she saw a chance to reclaim the future she once thought lost. Together they began to rebuild, not just a company, but lives fractured by regret and silence. Evelyn's voice, once buried beneath the hum of machines and whispered judgments, now carried weight. And William, the once feared billionaire, was learning what it meant to be truly seen, and to see others. One evening, after a long day filled with meetings and breakthroughs, Evelyn stood alone in the lobby of the towering building. Her reflection shimmered in the glass doors, a silhouette framed by city lights and distant stars. She smiled faintly, a woman reborn not by fortune, but by resilience and quiet courage. "Now it's time to go back to the café," she thought. After the 30 days ended, Evelyn returned to the cafe, the place that had been her refuge and stage for quiet resilience. The routine settled back, but something had shifted in the air. The whispers, the glances, the subtle nods of respect. Yet Evelyn felt the weight of uncertainty pressing down. Would this fragile bridge they'd built withstand the silence? Then one raining evening the cafe was nearly empty as Evelyn wiped down the counters, the soft hum of the late evening settling around her like a familiar blanket. The air smelled faintly of brewed coffee and damp earth from the steady drizzle outside. Outside, the streetlights cast long, golden reflections on the slick pavement, and a chill clung to the air. Evelyn's fingers moved methodically, folding napkins, her mind distant but steady. Then, the bell above the door rang sharply, breaking the quiet. She looked up, and there he was, William Carter. No grand entrance this time, no storm of fury or arrogance. Just a man drenched from the rain, his coat clinging to his frame, eyes searching. He moved forward slowly, as if stepping into unfamiliar territory, his gaze fixed on her with a vulnerability that unsettled the usual power dynamic between them. His usual commanding presence was softened, almost fragile. "Evelyn," he said, his voice low but resolute, "I've been looking for you." She blinked, heart tightening. "William, what, why? It's late. You shouldn't be here." He shook off the rain, pulling off his soaked coat and draping it over a nearby chair. "I couldn't stop thinking about what you said, about not leaving, about how much you mean. I was wrong to think I could just let this end." Evelyn's eyes narrowed, guarded but curious. "This is your world, William. The towers, the deals, the chaos. I'm not sure I belong there." He stepped closer, his gaze intense. "That's just it. I don't want you to belong to that world. I want us to find a new one. Together. You don't have to be just the quiet voice in the corner or the reluctant observer anymore." For a moment, the sound of rain outside filled the space between them. The hum of the city seemed distant, as if the night itself was holding its breath. "I've spent years building walls," William continued, his voice breaking with rare honesty. "Walls that kept people out, including you. But those walls are crumbling. I don't want to lose you. Not again." Evelyn's hands trembled slightly, the weight of years of silence and pain pressing down. She had chosen solitude, survival in the margins, a life away from ambition and heartbreak. Yet here he was, offering not just partnership, but something deeper, trust. "Why now?" she whispered, voice soft but steady. "Because you remind me who I was before the money, before the power. The man who cared. The man who still can." He reached out, hesitating, then gently took her hand. The gesture was simple, but it carried the weight of unspoken promises and new beginnings. Outside, a car passed, its headlights briefly illuminating the cafe's warm interior. Evelyn looked down at their joined hands, then back up into William's eyes, searching for certainty, for a sign she could trust. "Don't leave," he repeated, this time more gently. "Not now, not ever." The words hung in the air, fragile and powerful all at once. Evelyn took a slow breath, the storm inside her quieting just enough to let hope Indiana. She nodded, a small, almost imperceptible movement, but it was enough. William smiled, a rare, genuine smile that reached his eyes, and for the first time the two stood not as billionaire and waitress, but as two wounded souls ready to face the uncertain future together. As the rain eased outside, the quiet cafe held a new warmth, a promise that some stories, no matter how broken, could still find their way to a hopeful ending.